Avery to me was the epitome of the oldest child. Ready, Freddie?
Welcome back to Straight Up Book Club. What season and what episode are we at, Heather?
I think we're season 4, episode 3. If I'm wrong, I owe everybody a cookie, but I do think that that's right.
It's been a blur, but season 4, episode 3. And today we're reading Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors.
Best author name ever.
Yeah, Coco is such a good name.
So good.
And so we're going to talk about the first half of this book, which is just after chapter 8. So what's happening?
Up to chapter 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's as far as we're going. A lot has happened, but also not a lot, because I feel like the major thing that has happened before. So essentially how this book starts is we have 4 sisters. We have Avery, she's the oldest. Then we have Bonnie, the second oldest. We have Nikki, the third. And then our youngest is Lucky. Mm-hmm. And we start to get to know a little bit about each of the sisters through their own perspectives, their own chapters. But one thing we do know from the beginning is that Nikki's dead. Yeah. We don't know quite yet exactly what happened. We do know that she is suffering from endometriosis, or was suffering from endometriosis, and she had a lot of pain from that. And we know that Bonnie has found her dead at their home, and there seems to be some allusion to maybe some painkillers or drugs, but it hasn't fully gone there yet.
Can I just pause you for a sec and talk about how weird it is that we found this book right after the last book? Because
yes,
right, they're both about the trauma and what happens after. I feel like most books are about it happening,
an inciting incident at the beginning or in the middle. Yeah,
it's so strange, the timing of it, because I don't think either of us planned it in that way. It just happened to be very similarly structured, and I found that fascinating.
That was something I didn't even realize until you had brought it up in our notes, but you're so right. I wonder if that's almost a new genre or a new way of writing where we tackle traumas of the past and then show how we experience that going into the future. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of funny because I listen to a lot of podcasts on writing and what you should and shouldn't do, and a lot of them talk about having action and not so much backstory, but mm-hmm. I feel these last 2 books have had a ton of backstory, but they've both been done really well, and in a way where we really see these characters. They're very character driven. These 4 sisters are painted so well. I can visualize them perfectly in my head. I can I almost know them through and through because they are so different, and because I think, as we discussed, we are sisters not to each other, as we clarified, but we have sisters in our lives. And I think that some of the, I don't want to say cliches, because it's not quite what it is, but some of the tropes of these sisters and where they fall in their sibling dynamics are very true to reality. Yeah. But as you'll probably hear, as we're about to say, Avery, she's the oldest. We find out that she kind of was forced into a little bit of a parentification role between her for her 3 younger sisters, because their father was an alcoholic. Their mother was kind of more concerned with their father than with their kids. She was a heroin addict for a while. But she did go to AA treatment. She's fully recovered. She's now this flourishing lawyer in Hampstead, which I guess is a suburb of London where mm-hmm. rich people live.
Yeah, I loved how it was described. It was it's kind of London if you're wealthy, but it sounds you also have the space, and I think she actually says London for wealthier people or something.
And I'm here London is for the wealthy. Have you been? It's so expensive.
So expensive.
A sandwich, or toasty as they call it. Oh my God, so pricey. But yes, London for the wealthy. This is where she lives with her wife, Chidi, who is a therapist. And they met in therapy, which I think is really interesting. And that seems to be an area where Chidi feels a little bit of shame, but they seem to have a flourishing relationship, to the point where I think Lucky even says that they're the only couple she knows that make marriage look like a good idea, which I thought was very insightful.
A lot of pressure.
Oh God, really though. So that's Avery. She's living with Chidi, and then we have Bonnie. Bonnie is a professional boxer, or at least she used to be a professional boxer. It seems that when she was going pro, something happened where it was a bad match. Her coach, I guess you would call him, threw in the towel on her. I don't know how much of a boxing term that is, but it sounds like something happened. Her coach made her stop the match, and she left boxing altogether. Now she's working as a bouncer in LA, where she beat up a guy, the wrong guy, I guess, one night, and now she's escaped LA to move to New York, while she's kind of waiting out this guy that she beat up, who seems to be out to get her. One thing I forgot to mention is that we do know that all 4 siblings did live in New York in a house there. And now that it's been a year since Nikki's passing, we do know this, that Nikki's dead and it's been a year, that the mom wants to sell the house. And Avery really doesn't want her to sell it. She's been paying the mortgage for the last year. Bonnie is now moving into that house. And then we have Lucky. And Lucky is the baby. She is an international...
She's the Beamer.
She is Beamer, and she's just like Beamer.
Yeah.
She is the partier. She is the one who is into, like, sex parties. And we start with her where she is at I don't know what they're called, when she's a model, and she's at like Paris Fashion Week or something, with a fitting. That's what they're called. Yeah. So she's there getting fitted for a dress, and it's right after she is off a bender, and she had actually kept drinking that morning, and she ends up throwing up all over her dress. She tried to say it was food poisoning, but they smelled the booze off of her. So she left that fitting and got a bunch of emails from her agency, obviously trying to fire her or something of the like. So Lucky moves in with Avery for a little bit. She messages Avery to be like, hey, can I come stay with you? Avery lets her, but then I think night 1, Lucky leaves to go to one of these crazy sex parties where she gets absolutely obliterated, to the point where she ends up on Avery's doorstep in the wee hours of the morning. Totally out of it. Avery brings her inside, tries to bring her back to life. The last thing we see is that they have a fight. So that's the very last moment, is that Lucky and Avery have a fight over this substance abuse problem, and Lucky messages Bonnie, I believe, and goes out to New York. And that's where we end on chapter 7, is where Lucky is flying out to New York to stay with Bonnie. A lot happened.
A lot happened.
Yeah, so so that's kind of where we are, where Lucky excuse me, Lucky is going to New York. We know 2 sisters are meeting up. One feels a little I think sad that she didn't get through to her younger sister. Oh, the other thing that I forgot to mention that I feel like is really important is that we know that Avery has been having an affair, or at least she slept with this one guy for one night.
I feel like she's mostly had relationships with men. With women, but she does talk about how there have been some men in her life.
But they kind of make fun of them. It's like, oh, Steve, him, like... I think his name was Steve, actually, where they're like, oh, Steve, he doesn't count. Like, he, like, I don't know. He sounded like he was quite the character. But yeah, you're right. She has been with, like, a couple of men, but, like, since everyone's known her, she's always been with women. And she is married to Chidi now, and she sleeps with this guy. He's in, like, his 20s, and he's a poet, and he lives with his parents, and they have sex. And he's like, oh, I didn't use a condom. Like, what if you get pregnant? And she's like, I'll take care of it. Yeah. And, that's kind of where we end with that affair. But then in the chapter when Lucky is leaving to go to New York, Chidi stops her and is like, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And she had found a plan B in Lucky's garbage can, like in the guest bathroom. She's like, if you're going through anything right now, I just want you to know that I'm here for you. And Lucky's like, that's not mine. So that's kind of where that ends on that side. So it's very juicy in this moment where we have like these sisters kind of coming together, but who knows what's going to happen, because they're all a mess. They are all a mess in their own distinct ways.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all just like trying to cope with, this loss. And I don't even think they understand like their life is unraveling, maybe because of it, or in a huge way, like influenced by losing Nikki. It's just... And a year has passed, right? And I don't think like there's a lot of processing of their feelings, like especially Lucky. Lucky is like very close to Nikki, right? They're the most similar in age too.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. Like there's 4 sisters, or at least there was 4 sisters, and there seems to be groups.
Yeah.
Like, and it was Avery and Bonnie and Lucky and Nikki by default of age groups. Like, what do you think of that? Do you think that's true to siblings? Like, when you have 4, I'm one of 4. One's a brother, so it's not quite the same, but I do think that when you have even numbers in sibling relationships, you do kind of group together. But then again, you're one of 3. We don't have to go into our sibling relationships, but like I am curious to know what you think about sibling like alliances and birth order and stuff like that, because I find sibling relationships and birth order so fascinating.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like for me it was like, yeah, I'm the youngest by far, right?
Are you lucky?
Am I lucky? I don't
kidding.
know.
You're not lucky. You're not any of them. Let's not align ourselves to any of them. No, they all have really sweet qualities too, though.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I've had a rebellious streak. But honestly, it's like, yeah, I feel like, you know, you're more close with the person that's closer in age to you, because those like age gaps feel so much bigger when you're younger, right? So I think I definitely had part of that. Like, I'm closer in age with my sister, so we were probably more alike together. But then my brother and my sister are closer, so they were together for a period too, like more close than I was with either of them. And I remember that feeling, you know, not good. And I feel like everyone, like, there are multiple dynamics in a sibling relationship. I feel like, you know, I don't think, especially when it's an odd number maybe, and it's more so there have to be like what's the word, a dynamic within a dynamic, you know what I mean? So the 3 of us hang out, but then, you know, I might hang out less with my brother than my brother and my sister hang out, or, you know.
I think you're right, and they kind of touch on that, because I think they do talk about the fact how there's like there was 4 of them, and now that there's only 3, the balance is off, and it's so hard to find an allegiance in a group that's not the right number. And I wouldn't be able to tell you what the exact quote is, but it is a moment that they touch on.
Is it like for you with your siblings?
When we were younger, the age gap was tremendous. Like the age gap between me and my brother were the 2 in the middle. So I'm Nikki, I guess. Oh, I'm the dead one. But I'm kidding. The age gap between me and my brother is 8 years, and then between him and my sister is 2 years, my older sister, and then between me and my younger sister is not even 2 years. It's like I don't even think it's a year and a half. So obviously growing up, it was almost like 2 sets of siblings. But now as we've gotten older and like, okay, 35 and 45 isn't that different. Or like, you know, none of us are 35 or 45 yet, but we're close.
Getting there.
But yeah, when you're older, it's easier to commingle. But I do think when you're in like when you're really young, but even like your teens and your early 20s and early 30s, like that age gap is a big difference, because you're at different places in your life.
Oh my gosh, especially 20s to 30s. That is big,
so
right?
big.
Like,
that's probably the hardest one.
Wanting to explore everything, be reckless, versus like, okay, like I'm done with that. I'm ready to settle in.
Kids, no kids. Not that that's changed, but
but more so just like, I just don't want like the wildness, you know, or the late nights, or the, you know, adventures that are potentially extreme.
Yeah, I do think that I don't know, I feel even in I look at my friends too, and like their dynamics. Every sibling dynamic of all of my friend groups is so interesting to me. Like you and your sister and your brother is such an interesting one. And I have a couple friends who are 1 of 3 sisters, one who's the oldest and one who's the youngest. I have a few friends who are only children, which is a whole other landscape to navigate. But it's all interesting. And
yeah,
I don't know about you, but the birth order in these 4, she was very good at writing about the qualities of oldest. Like Avery to me was the epitome of the oldest child. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, and she had to be, and that was really sad. Like, she didn't have a choice. Like, she had to do these things. She had to take care of her sister. So she grew up, she didn't have a childhood, you know, and that part of it is like, yes, like a lot of oldest siblings do, like with latchkey kids or something like that, like, you know, quintessential 90s where you have to sort of grow up in a way. But I think this was way more than, you know, most kids are asked of. You know, she really had to fully step into that role of being a mother, and she's very aware of it, and it did have a big impact in her 20s and, you know, further on.
It's so true. Like, I think it was not just the parentification in the sense where she had to take on parental responsibilities. Like, my older sister is 10 years older, so naturally she watched us a lot and babysat. And I look back on that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot to ask of an oldest child. But in this case, Avery, she had to protect her siblings from this alcoholic father. And he had these bouts of rage, it seemed like, where he'd like break dishes, and one year he pulled down the Christmas tree, I believe. So there was moments of it they never talked about violence towards them, but just a general sense of like violence in the house towards like more tangible things, which is still scary when you're a child. And that's something that I think Avery felt like she had to protect them all from.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, because, okay, so again, like, we're reading a lot of books with domestic abuse. There was It Ends With Us, and then there was A Little Life also, and, you know, like, there's a kid in that too that it's happening to. So yeah, I was just kind of struck by how many books recently it's come up in as well, and how much space he took with his anger and with his just sort of moods and all of that. And yeah, I guess I'm curious about, you know, do you think like these sort of patterns that we experience in our lives like impact like who we want to be? You know, because I think like these sisters, like, they became people out of necessity. Do you think that's also impacting who they wanted to be, though? Because I think their choices are very
I do think that's the case, because I mean, I think everybody experiences either becoming like your parents or becoming the opposite of your parents in their own way. And I feel like it's always intentional is not the right word, but I mean, look at Bonnie. Bonnie never touched alcohol or drugs. And she found I'll call it an addiction for the sake of this, but like, because I think at one point Avery talks about how they're a family of addictions. Not Avery. Bonnie's addiction is the gym, is boxing, is working out. She treats it with a hyperfixation, like she doesn't with other things. Like, it's the only thing that she focuses on. And I do think that for Bonnie, this is very much her way of not being like her parents.
Yeah.
And I think Avery fell into the patterns of being like her parents as a way to escape what she was forced into, which was being a parent at the age of like however old she was when Bonnie was born.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But then realizing she didn't want that for herself, getting clean, escaping that, and removing herself from her parents' lifestyle. I do think that was very intentional. Nikki, we don't know, because Nikki died, but Nikki was a very sweet, loving, doting person. Who didn't, I remember there's one point when they talk about the fact that she didn't need to have a sip of alcohol to be the life of a party, or she didn't need any of those things to like be her true authentic self. But then she did have to use painkillers in order to get through her pain. So, which I don't think is the same thing.
Yeah.
But I do think that the other side of her, where she wasn't really using alcohol or drugs, is probably a response to her parents.
Well, the Nikki theme you brought up is really interesting, because I think like her choices were because she really wanted to have kids.
Yeah.
And maybe in that way, she was like pushing off her surgery because she wanted to have kids before she had the surgery. And well, maybe she wants to like correct, you know, what she experienced, and sort of, because a lot of people want that, you know, they want to do better than their parents. They want to have, you know, if you
raise kids the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Like whatever your parents did, you feel like you can do it better. You know, that's just like age old. This is sort of cliche that we live in. And I think like maybe that's what her drive was, or what that ended up being for her, you know, and maybe she didn't get to experience it.
Wanting the perfect life. Like if you grow up in poverty, you want to have money or security. If you grow up in an unstable household, all you want is stability. If you grow up super privileged, as we saw in Long Island Compromise, you want
to give it all away.
Yes, I know what it feels like to be poor, apparently.
Yeah.
And I do think that I'm not saying that that's the case in every single situation, but I do think that it rings true to reality. Like a lot of the decisions that I make are either in line with ways that I want to align myself to my parents, or in ways that I want to be totally opposite of them. And, you know, I think that's why we go to therapy, to kind of figure out, okay, well, I know what I don't want because I've seen this and I don't think that it works.
Yeah.
Wow, isn't life just all trial and error based on like our poor parents who are all like genuinely, I think for the most part, just trying their best.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you think that people make decisions based on what they've already experienced in like their childhoods?
Yeah, I do think like when you've seen something and it's impacted you that badly, not that badly, but that strongly.
Yeah.
You know, your drive is to do everything you can to not experience it again, or not repeat it, and, you know, not repeat those patterns. So I do think in a lot of ways, yes, like even if you have a good life, and even if you have like a life that's like causing you trauma, there's something in it that, you know, you want to do better in. And then you're sort of pushing yourself to get there. And so I think that does shape you. And so maybe it's not that you want to be that person, it's because it's more so that the things you want push you to be that person, if that makes sense. It's almost like indirect in a way.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be that person to get to what you think of as a perfect life.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that rings true, and I think that's evident in like all of these sisters in their own ways, their own kind of tragic ways so far. I have hope for them though.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting too. Like, sorry, just a tangent, I guess. But earlier you were talking about Chidi.
Chidi, I love Chidi.
Yeah. Chidi, she was sort of in almost like a power, she's not a power figure, but she is like someone, she's Avery's therapist, right?
I would
like
say that's a power figure.
Yeah, you think? Yeah, I guess.
I think so.
They're shaping you in a way, right? Or yeah, they have the potential to.
I think we rely a lot on them to tell us what to do.
Yeah. So
anyway, sorry, keep going.
No. Like, so that relationship is interesting because it's also similar to Pavel and Bonnie's relationship.
You're right.
And then does this sort of like lead into their parent relationships and parent dynamics as well? You know, they're just trying to find these sort of power figures that feel good in a way. You know, is there some sort of, am I looking too deep into this, you think? Or maybe
no, I love this. I never thought about it, but you're so right. Like Avery did find that in her therapist, which is like the biggest no. And I know that her like shame over this is kind of like glazed over. But if that happened in real life, that would be horrible. Like you could lose your license, I'm pretty sure, if you end up dating a client. Are we called clients? I don't know what we're called.
You're patient.
Patient, yeah. The guest. We call them a guest. Yeah, no, you're right. And then Bonnie has Pavel, who she's in love with too. Mm-hmm. Oh, damn.
Yeah.
Who's Lucky's person? Who's Lucky's figure? Is it Nikki and Nikki's dad? And that's why she's struggling? I don't know. I don't know if Lucky has one. Probably still her sisters. I think Lucky is like your epitome of the youngest child. Mm-hmm. And tell me if I'm wrong as I say this, because you are the youngest child. But, you know, I do think that she really does look to her sisters for guidance, and in a way that she doesn't necessarily want to show, which I think is kind of sweet. But That's interesting.
Yeah.
They are really just looking for guidance because they never had it.
It's true. I feel like we're going to get more into that in like part 2 as well. Like more about I want to know more about their mom, you know.
I do too. We haven't seen their parents yet. I really hope that we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Please join us next time as we read chapter 8 on... Am I forgetting anything? I don't remember how to clean this up.
On what? You had it. And then
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Join us next time as we read the second half of Coco Mellors' Blue Sisters. We're going to be reading chapter 8 on, and we will see if we meet the parents. We'll see if these 3 sisters get their shit together, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, they process that trauma and what it ends up looking like for them.
Find out how Nikki died.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. See you at book club.
Bye.
Bye.